Hi everybody, this is Aaron Murakami with eMediaPress.com and the Energy Science and Technology Conference at EnergyScienceConference.com. And today we have Eric Dollard with us from EPD Laboratories Inc. His website is ericpdollard.com, and it is for a 501c3 nonprofit corporation based out of Nevada. And in July, coming up here in about 6 to 7 weeks, is the 8th annual Energy Science and Technology Conference. It'll be held on July 11th through the 14th, which is Thursday through Sunday. And Eric will be giving two presentations. One will be a 4.5 hour long presentation on Tesla's Colorado Springs transformer. And the second presentation, which we're going to give a basic overview on, is called Electrodynamic Seismic Forecasting. And we'll just be going over a handful of slides here to just kind of give a basic overview of what this presentation is going to be about. And so, Eric, how would you define electrodynamic seismic forecasting, and what exactly is that?
Well, any type of seismic event is preceded by extremely powerful electrical activities of almost unimaginable magnitude, which are actually not that difficult to pick up, and people have picked them up. I've used that method. Other people have used static methods. I prefer to use the dynamic method, which is unique to my system. I'm not using magnetic fields or electrostatic potentials. I'm using actual Alexanderson or Tesla type radio waves that originate from the seismic zone roughly 2 days before the event. But I'm going to get into also going to get into the potential method developed by three people in Greece, and it's known by their three initials of their last name, V, A, and M. So it's been termed the VAM system. It was quite successful and then simply smothered out of existence. But it clearly demonstrates the feasibility. So after these people's effort, there can't be any denying that earthquakes are preceded by electrical activity. And then I'll get into my Landers installation and show that I actually built a complete facility for doing all of these type of things. It took me about 30 years. Of course, the usual thing happened, that it always happens to me, and it's all gone. And it can't be duplicated, but fortunately I managed to get some people to document it before it was destroyed. The documentation's not really that good because the guy didn't know how to use the camera or whatever, but at any rate it shows the overall system. And then I'm going to show what is presently under construction, which is moving at a snail's pace because we really can't get any backers for this. It's just simply nobody's interested in these things anymore, but we did manage to make some good progress before it finally ran out of money, so I'm going to show that and the results from that also.
Hey, what do we see in these pictures here?
Okay, this is the test site in Nevada. We have a 2.2 mile long right-of-way, which we can put our wires and cross arms up. So I have the testing equipment in the back of my car, and it's connected to the end of an experimental section of antenna that we put together on the poles. Temporary. It was field telephone wire, so it didn't last, but we were doing our initial investigations here to see how bad the power line interference was. And this is when it was discovered that there are just unbelievable quantities of stray power line electricity flowing through the earth because of the bad practices being forced on us by these aberrant utility companies unable to deal with their harmonics and reconfiguring everything to Y. And we found out to our horror that the interference is 20 million times stronger than the signal, so that's going to kind of change the level of research we're doing in the test site. We've got to stick pretty much to frequencies beyond the power line harmonic range, above 9,000 cycles. So this will mainly be for studying the Alexanderson method, communicating in and out of the earth and using more of an overground seismic forecasting system rather than an underground.
So that's chapter 1.
So this where I talk about the so-called Van method. It's not really very complicated. There's not really a lot to talk about. So if you go to the next image, I'll show you the. It's pretty clear. You can't really argue with what you see here. That before the earthquake, the instrumentation picked up electrostatic potentials or electromotive forces that were derived out of the earth by two ground rods, roughly maybe like 15 miles apart, and connected to a millivolt meter which drove the pen on the chart recorder and appropriate interference filtering and what have you, and drift filtering. So this is I don't know what the exact advanced time was, but it was in the order of, I think, close to a week that these signals started preventing themselves, and then they were able to, through their method of analysis, were able to pinpoint the location and the magnitude of the earthquakes, several of them with 99.5% accuracy, and then the thing was officially declared bogus, and it dried up and blew away in the wind, and that's the end of that. It's gone. Then I'm going to do a step-by-step through my Landers electric wave research facility, which was probably the biggest installation in private hands of its kind. Normally only the military has things like this. It took me 30 years to assemble it, 20 years of work in the surplus industry to get all the parts, which none of which are really available anymore. So I will cover all the aspects of that and how it went together and the construction and what it looked like.
Then here's a one-year chart.
There's my one-year chart of the recordings. Unfortunately, there were not any large local earthquakes at that time, but there were, the vertical lines indicate there were a number of major earthquakes around the planet, and this shows an interesting correlation between the earthquakes and solar flares, and basically shows how the instrumentation at Landers responded to the Earth's electrical signals in the region of Landers. Now, one thing that I lost when the installation was looted and destroyed was the copies of the Japan earthquake, where in the middle graph the green line went off the scale and stayed off the scale for 2 days before the main event.
And so there's 4 different types of data here, right?
Yeah,
Above,
the
below.
bottom one is the solar flux. The upper one is the vibration counter. So I had a seismic geophone embedded into a massive rock formation. Probably this diameter was like the entire crust of the earth. It's massive rock, granite, very old decomposed granite rock. So that microphone connected to various, as I'll show in the presentation, various filters and what have you, and then that went to impulse counter. So the top graph is the impulse counts, and then the middle graph, the red, is the Earth to ionosphere electrical activity, and the green is the inside of the Earth electrical activity. And each data point was where the counter or the chart or whatever ended up at that day, the maximum values. So every day the maximum value on the chart recorders were logged, or on the impulse counters were logged, and then that was entered. And this was a 1-year compilation of when I managed to have somebody there every day to write those data points. So it's kind of interesting to see how there's a rise in solar flux and then a delayed rise in vibrations of the Earth. And then in the middle graph, the red shows mostly lightning activity. And then the green is basically the the lightning inside the Earth, or the interaction between lightning inside the Earth and lightning outside of the Earth. There are lightning storms inside the Earth that are associated with these earthquakes.
And this is the current system being built near the shop.
What has been developed to this point. That is, like I say, because there's no major sources of funding anymore, it's stopped. But at any rate, we did manage to recover and erect a lot of very long lines out in the desert for continuing this type of research.
And I believe yesterday I had posted an EPD Laboratories Inc. Update video courtesy of Scott Hensler. It's about 7 minutes long. If you go to ericpdollard.com, and in the left column you'll see one of the recent blog posts is an update video, and Scott took a video of Eric walking through the lab, pointing out the different types of equipment on the racks, the storage in the shipping container out back. But the equipment on the racks, that's been being accumulated little by little over the last however many years. A lot of hard to get equipment, and
so now we're seeing what works and what doesn't, and trying to fix it and get it configured. So there is a whole plan of how to install all this equipment. I show some of the floor plans, but there's no money to build the facilities. It's about $250,000 required to build all the facilities to house all this stuff. So originally none of this was supposed to be showed to the public, but now that the cat's kind of out of the bag and the material has been sanitized and classified stuff has been pulled out, I'm now willing to show some of the details of what we've been working on. So this is, we're restoring a defunct long-distance open wire carrier telephone line, about 2.5 miles long. So this is the process here of restringing the wires, replacing busted cross arms, resetting new poles in the place of rotten ones, and what have you. This was about a 4 or 5 year effort to restore this particular line. The other one, where my car was backed up to, that is an abandoned cable TV line, and we were also managed to get that right away, and that is similar hardware, same type of wires and insulators and cross arms and what have you. This is what's called O carrier. I get into detail on this stuff in the presentation I did called the musical seismograph. So this is the measurements, the signals that we're getting. So this facility is complete as a end-to-end ground rod configuration. There's no loading coils or what have you yet, but it can do a electrostatic out of the earth and electrostatic off the ionosphere at the same time. So it does have the stereo capability, and the interference is acceptable. So this is basically, this first stage is complete. We can't go any farther with it until we lease a space in the microwave facility that's adjacent to this to put the terminal equipment in, but there's no money for that. This is some of the impulses I was receiving off of landers, and very similar impulses on what I just showed you. And then down below is I built an analog network to generate the same impulses. So in the end, I think we left the title page out here, but towards the end I'm going to get into the basic theory of how these things are laid out and what kind of networks are involved and what have you. So what I've done is, this is the a representation of the Bolinas Alexanderson array, and then I will show how the Alexanderson idea is modified into a new type of antenna that basically allows itself to be implemented as a radio telescope for listening inside of the Earth, and to operate in the Tesla mode where it's unclosed currents, so it's capable of receiving radially out of the interior of the Earth as a radio telescope, such as the one that I operated in Landers.
Now, a lot of the systems that you're involved with are obviously beyond the ability of most people in terms of funding, the scale of it, the knowledge and experience to be able to put it together. Is there a simple, like, small scale system that somebody could make to just kind of get their feet wet in detecting these type of inner Earth signals, such as what's laid out at Riggs property?
Yeah, it's not feasible for most people because the utility company conversion, unless you're in a very rare circumstance where this has not been implemented, such as if the LA Department of Water and Power does not generate any interference. In fact, I think they're the only utility company now that's interference free. Pacific Gas and Electric used to be interference free, but they're going along with the conversion to the EMP receiving type of power system. So at Riggs' place, he has the necessary property. You have to have at least 1,800 feet separation between ground rods, and you're still going to get a blast of hum. The other problem is the Navy transmitter tends to wipe out whatever speakers or amplifiers and make your dog squeal and run for cover because it can hear it and you can't, and it's full blast. We blew up a set of speakers at Riggs' place because we couldn't hear it. The dog ran out of the room, and what have you. So there's all these complications. You have to be able to build the necessary filter networks. You have to be away from power line harmonics, which is damn near impossible. They're getting stronger and stronger every year. But if you have some remote property out in the middle of nowhere and you can stretch out a good fraction of a mile or more field telephone wire and a couple of ground rods, and then use the easiest thing to use is a Steve McGreevy device, because they usually have the filtering and the overload protection built in, and those are readily available. He would, in the case of this, you would be using the low impedance method. If you use the device by itself with just a little whip antenna, you can hear these signals, but they don't happen all the time. So it's not something you can just idly do, because you feel like it that afternoon, because this stuff doesn't happen all the time. And with the low solar activity, the Earth's magnetic field is kind of going dead, and a lot of the entertaining signals that people used to listen to, the whistlers and the chirps and the dawn chorus and all that, are gone. So there's these are the things that make it so you're not really going to get much out of it unless you can have it like I had at Landers. Is running over at Riggs' place now. It's running 24 hours a day, interference free, and so you just happen to be getting it when the earthquake happens. It's not a spot thing.
And Steve McGreevy's devices are available through his website at auroralchorus.com. And if you want to learn more about Steve's work in that, there is a presentation at naturalvlfradio.com, I believe. I'll post a link in this presentation. Now, in the last couple months, or I don't know, in the last 2 or 3 months or something, President Trump signed an executive order specifically dealing with EMP and the vulnerabilities of the grid. And in a way, it's almost like he's paying attention to what EPD Labs is doing. Because what was your take on actually reading that executive order?
Well, what it indicated is to start building facilities to detect and analyze these impulses, which can come from a nuclear detonation, it can come from a coronal mass ejection colliding with the Earth's electric field, or it can come from a large earthquake. But as we know, all of this stuff will just be the carpetbaggers and what have you will horn in on it, and they'll get all the money and produce nothing. And the people that actually know what to do will be left to live in their cars, and it won't go anywhere. That's the way this country operates, and that's that. So nothing will come out of it.
But in that executive order, there were references to telluric monitoring.
Right.
Now, is that specific for earthquakes or?
Well, in that case, they're thinking about the nuclear EMP is of course the main consideration, and then any possible eruptions from the sun. But the sun is so dead right now, it looks like we're just going to go into an ice age, and there won't be any more sunspots for maybe over 100 years. But you never know what the sun's going to do. The earthquake end of it is left out because Einstein says earthquakes don't generate electrical signals, so that's ruled out. But what's interesting is now that it can't be denied anymore, the USGS, which is one of the biggest opponents of all electrical seismic forecasting, is now starting to inch its way into it so they can just soak it up and keep it a secret. And the utility companies and what have you that really need this information will never get it. And that's just the way it operates. So basically, I view the whole seismic forecasting thing as a dead horse, and have no more interest in it unless someone wants to put out the money to make it happen. Somebody wants to pay for it, I'll build it, but I'm not going to hold my breath. But it can't be argued anymore that there's no electrical activity preceding an earthquake. And this electrical activity is not necessarily something so weak that you need a microvolt meter to pick it up, because it can actually trip circuit breakers and substations, produce magnetic fields so intense that all the tools in an entire town become magnetized. And once you know how to properly phase into this stuff, and you can get that signal back out, you don't really need a lot of sensitive equipment. And when the earthquake itself actually occurs, it will dominate over all of the power line interference. It will become many times stronger than the power line interference, to the point that it can actually cause damage to the power system. And I would estimate before the big earthquake in Japan that all kinds of things were screwing up. And nobody really thought that it would have connected to what was impending. But at any rate, if I could pick up on a half-mile long wire 20 feet off the ground enough voltage to go 100% on my strip chart recorder on the other side of the earth, then what's the excuse for not picking up anything in Japan?
Well, if you want to help participate by getting involved either by donations, or if you know somebody who is capable of funding something like this on a large scale, at ericpdollar.com is all the contact information. Even the smaller donations help to run the operation, to pay for building expenses. As you know, we had already paid off the entire building, so it's property tax, insurance, utilities, and the basic operating expenses. Those are very, very, very helpful, and it can also help to pay for parts for experiments and that kind of thing. Eric is primarily working on his presentation and writings right now, but as you can see in the recent EPD update video, as I mentioned, that Scott Hensler at scotthensler.com had provided to us, you can see that Eric is showing some of the rack equipment, and that's all for the seismic project. So even though it's kind of moving slow, whatever is available to us, it is being used and it is moving forward. And so if you do want to help out, pitch in anything that you can, go to ericpdollar.com. Details on how to donate are in the donate button in the main menu bar, or you can look in the right column and scroll down, and there's a PayPal donate button if you want to donate by a credit or debit card online, or if you want to send a check or money order, there's a address there in Spokane, Washington you can send donations to, made payable to EPD Laboratories Inc., which is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, so all donations are tax deductible. And so hopefully we'll see you at the conference. Pretty much most of the seats are sold out, but every year there's about 5 or 10 people who got tickets and couldn't make it, and so there's a handful of seats available. You can go to energyscienceconference.com and click on the registration button to fill out your registration, and that'll direct you to a page with some PayPal buttons where you can purchase your tickets with or without meals, or with or without the evening business presentations. So until next time, we'll see you all there. Thanks for watching.